our military analytics. The aggressive moves of Russia in Eastern Europe and China in the Pacific are forcing the US and its allies to take drastic measures, especially recently as Taiwan tensions in the South China Sea escalate. The US and UK tighten their measures both in Europe, in the Pacific, and in the Baltics. While experts emphasize the risks of Russia's aggression towards the Baltics and Scandinavian countries, NATO superpowers are evolving the Ukrainian army into the best in the world. The key links in the chain of events that could shake the global balance of power are the escalations in the Crimea, in the Black Sea, the Gulf of Finland and the Baltics, and the Taiwan Strait in the Pacific. In these regions, the US allies and Russia somehow come face to face among these regions. Right now it is Crimea that directly affects and worries Vladimir Putin. Although Crimea is the legitimate territory of Ukraine, it has been under Russian annexation for 9 years. While Ukraine's pressure on Crimea has been increasing in recent months, Ukrainian allies are making every effort to strengthen this pressure, while the U.S. Army retired General Ben Hodges emphasizes that it's not that difficult for Ukraine to take back Crimea. The UK Army is turning 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers in total into the world's most elite special operations unit. These 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers trained in the UK will be the striking team for Ukraine's large-scale Crimean offensive against Russia. Signs that a Ukrainian offensive is imminent are evident when Vladimir Putin visits the occupied part of Kherson, and NATO boss Jens Stoltenberg visits Ukraine and checks in on troops. Let's look at the adventure of 60,000 elite Ukrainian soldiers for the Crimean offensive, the security measures in the region, and the general situation. The second round of the war between Russia and Ukraine is about to begin. The address of the second round is quite remarkable. With the warning of the weather, it seems inevitable that counterattacks will start, and that both sides of the war will now turn to the southern front lines. Both armies continue their preparations for counterattack. Russia wants to seize the entire Donbas region, and Ukraine wants to take back the lost lands. But at the moment, the Crimean Peninsula, as the most strategic target, is attracting all the attention. The plans of the Ukrainian forces to seize the peninsula created a bombshell effect on the agenda. Since last summer, Ukraine's surprise ally has trained large numbers of Ukrainian soldiers, becoming a facilitator of Kiev's major Crimean offensive plan. Let's take a closer look at this critical Crimean plan and what Ukraine's surprise ally did to make it happen. Tanks sent by the United States, Germany, and the United Kingdom in the last month are expected to be effective in Ukraine's counterattack. It is an undeniable fact that in addition to tanks, soldiers also play an effective role in the counterattack in war. That's why the UK is training soldiers serving in the Ukrainian army. Yes, as we mentioned, Ukraine's surprise ally, the UK, is one of the protagonists of this striking Crimean plan of Kiev. Nearly 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained in the UK by British forces since last summer, but the pace picked up considerably after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak increased it from 10,000 to 20,000 a month earlier this year. In a frenzy ahead of President Vladimir Zelensky's spring offensive against Russian forces, the UK is training 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers every 5 weeks. Trainers from Canada, Denmark, Finland, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Australia, and New Zealand were brought in to assist the British trainers during the training. Ukrainian soldiers are taught a range of combat skills such as rural and urban warfare and counter IED and 35-day training missions. These combat skills include survival in a hostile environment, medical trauma, weapon handling, marksmanship, and armed conflict law. Also training areas including Salisbury Plain, Hankley, Common Longmoor, Catterick, and Otterburn have been fully taken over for duty at Salisbury Plain. Ukrainian soldiers are taught to command artillery and coordinate airstrikes using AS-90 self-propelled artillery donated by the UK. AS-90 self-propelled artillery 155mm mobile artillery system is capable of firing up to 6 rounds per minute. For this reason, AS-90 training is very important. The large area in Wiltshire is also used for armored infantry training, live shooting with general-purpose machine guns, and specialist sniper training. After the UK's donation of thousands of PM'd guns, sniper rifles, and ammunition at Longmoor in Hampshire, Ukrainian soldiers are guided on their routine patrols, while at Hankley Common in Surrey, they take part in attacks and mock Russian positions during the dawn strikes. They are also taught to fly helicopters, use drones at night, and engage in close combat in simulated villages. A final week-long exercise testing the training of Ukrainian soldiers is being held in Salisbury. Meanwhile, a top military source confirmed that Ukrainian training has now become the main priority of the Ministry of Defense. In fact, all this affected the routine training of UK battalions. But both UK soldiers and Ukrainian troops have to face the storm. Meanwhile, the UK also became the first ally to train its Ukrainian pilots in NATO airspace tactics. But Rishi Sunak drew the red line in providing fast jets. The support for Ukraine is not limited to training soldiers. As part of the accelerated support package, the UK will send a fleet of Challenger 2 tanks as 90 self-propelled 155mm guns to Ukraine, hundreds of armored and protected vehicles, dozens of unmanned aerial systems to support Ukrainian artillery, 100,000 artillery shells, GMLRS rockets, Starstreak air defense missiles, as well as 600 Brimstone missiles will be delivered to Ukraine. In addition, the UK will send armor-piercing shells containing depleted uranium to Ukraine for use in Challenger 2 battle tanks. Such shells are quite effective in defeating modern tanks and armored vehicles. Depleted uranium is a standard component of controversial anti-armor weapons that NATO countries have used for decades. The density of depleted uranium makes it an effective material for piercing heavy armor on the battlefield and is used by many armies. In short, Ukraine is trying to strengthen its army by using all the means before the counterattack. Here again, his Western friends come into play. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, Ukraine's goal is to take back the lost lands. It's unclear where the weight of Ukraine's impending counteroffensive will fall, but a successful attack on the southern Kherson and Zaporizhia regions could open the way to the Crimea and cut off the Russian supply route to the peninsula. That's why the key piece of land here is Crimea as it is known. The leader of Kiev has often expressed his insistence on taking back Crimea. Zelensky's insistence gained meaning with the plans made. Let's take a closer look at Ukraine's plan for Crimea. Ukraine has outlined a plan for how it can reclaim control of Crimea from Putin's hands. Alexei Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, published the plan ahead of the counterattack that Kiev is planning this spring. The plan includes dismantling the massive 19-kilometer bridge between Crimea and Russia, which has been dubbed Europe's longest bridge. In October, a truck bomb significantly damaged the bridge and Russia flagged Ukrainian military intelligence. Ukraine did not claim responsibility for the bomb, but Ukrainian authorities have repeatedly threatened to hit the bridge in the past. Also in the Danilov plan, he proposed that all Ukrainians working for the Moscow-appointed administration in Crimea be prosecuted. Danilov said that some of the employees will face criminal charges, while others will lose their state pensions and be barred from public jobs. According to the plan, Russians who moved to Crimea after 2014 will be deported. Meanwhile, all real estate deals made under Russian rule would be voided. It is difficult to predict when Kiev will realize the Crimean plan. However, looking at the successes achieved on the front lines, Crimea is not an impossible target for Ukraine. In short, Crimea is Ukraine, and one day this historical peninsula will return to its real owner. The Ukrainian armed forces, equipped with Western equipment, stopped the advance of Russian troops on the front lines. At the same time, the success of the Kiev forces broke the morale and motivation of the Russian army. As long as his Western friends are with Zelensky, it seems almost impossible for the Russian leader to turn this war in his favor. We will wait and see how the strengthening of ties between the UK and Ukraine will affect Putin. How does a war start? All wars begin with a single attack. The response to this attack determines how history will be shaped. All great wars have been the result of a single attack followed by a crisis. There has been another such attack. US drones have been shot down after being harassed by Russian aircraft. This is one of the most critical incidents between the US and Russia since the Second World War. Experts say it could change everything, but why was this incident so important? First of all, let's learn all the details. The US administration is closely monitoring the war between Russia and Ukraine. All details and intelligence reports about this war are being analyzed. For this, the US administration uses many sources, one of which is drones. Drones belonging to the US military are flying over the Black Sea and collecting information on the latest situation of the war. The Black Sea is one of the most important regions in this war. The Crimean Peninsula is located on the Black Sea. Both Russia and Ukraine have a wide border for the Black Sea. It is also known that there are oil and natural gas resources in the Black Sea. That is why this region is so important. On the southern shores of the Black Sea is Turkey, a NATO member. There are many NATO bases in Turkey. The U.S. military often uses bases in Turkey for operations in the Black Sea for both surveillance and airstrikes. The United States uses MQ-9 Reapers, which have a wingspan of 20 meters and are about 11 meters long. These drones fly in the Black Sea and especially around Crimea. The drones fly in international waters of the Black Sea to prevent any tension. But Russia is very uncomfortable with these drones because the Russian army does not want it to be known that it is in a very bad situation in the war. Russian warplanes often make harassment flights to prevent U.S. drones from taking pictures, but this time the tension between Russian planes and U.S. drones escalated. Two Su-27 fighter jets of the Russian army flew very close to the U.S. drones. The propeller of one of these planes hit the wing of the U.S. drone, and the drone fell into the sea. Russia damaged a U.S. military vehicle, causing an escalation of tensions. The downing of U.S. drone has raised tensions around the world. Defense ministers and intelligence officials in many countries are reportedly meeting on an emergency basis. If the U.S. government responds harshly, a conflict between the two countries could break out. Experts believe that the U.S. will not take a very harsh decision at first. However, this incident may soon lead the U.S. to intervene in the region. Some international relations experts claim that the U.S. will deploy more drones in the Black Sea. These drones will observe strategic areas of the Russian military and send information to Ukraine. It could also launch attacks if the U.S. deems it necessary. The first statement from the U.S. said the following about the incident. Aggressive actions by Russian aircrews are dangerous and can lead to miscalculation and unwanted escalation. The U.S. use of the term unwanted escalation reminded everyone of the Cold War during the Cold War. Tensions were very high and there were fears of a world war. The tension between the two countries reached a very high level again, and there was an unwanted escalation. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said, President Joe Biden has been briefed on the incident. The entire U.S. administration is working on this incident. It is claimed that Biden has prepared reports containing all the details on the subject. According to some allegations in the British press, U.S. President Joe Biden asked for a report on the military's drone capacity. It is thought that Biden may send more drones to the region. On the other hand, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said the U.S. government would summon the Russian ambassador over what he said was a clear violation of international law. The meeting between the Russian ambassador and the U.S. Secretary of State is likely to be very tough. The outcome of this meeting will show how the parties will behave. The U.S. government is making all preparations just in case. Senior NATO General Christopher Cavoli briefed NATO allies in detail about the incident. NATO member countries are reportedly preparing for this event. All armies are mobilizing. NATO members are mobilizing their armies to use their full military capacity. It is reported that if the U.S. government decides to attack, all NATO members will attack Russia. This could result in a complete takeover of Russia. The Russian army, which has suffered a major failure in Ukraine, is not strong enough to withstand a NATO army. But other countries could join this conflict if countries like China, North Korea, Iran, and Belarus join this war. World War III could start. The U.S. government thinks that millions of people would die in a global war. That's why it doesn't want a new war to start. Experts expect us to make two moves at this stage. First, diplomatic and commercial moves will be made against Russia. After the meeting with the Russian ambassador, it is planned to limit diplomatic relations with Russia. It also aims to increase economic sanctions against Russia. The Russian economy is in a very bad situation. If the sanctions increase further, the Russian economy is more likely to collapse. If the Russian economy collapses, the Putin regime could collapse completely. Putin may have to withdraw from Ukraine to prevent this. The U.S. government wants to force Putin to make peace through economic moves, but experts say that the U.S. is prepared for all eventualities. The other move of the U.S. is expected to be to send strategic support to the Ukrainian army. The U.S. government has been sending support to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, but after the downing of the U.S. drone, this support will increase even more. The U.S. is expected to send the most advanced weapon systems to Ukraine. This will put the Russian army in a very difficult situation on the battlefield. Other NATO member states are also expected to send more support to Ukraine. This movement in NATO is being followed by experts in many countries. All experts say that the risk of a world war is increasing every day. The decisions of the US government will determine how this crisis will end. But everyone knows that Russia has made a big mistake with this operation. Russia is backed into a corner and is desperate. Shooting down the US drone was the biggest mistake of the Russian military. What do you think about this crisis between the US and Russia? How do you think the crisis will end? Do you think it will result in a new war?